All right, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Chris, and today I am joined with some very special guests for launch party number 2 for Together is a Distant Star. Again, I am going to be greedy, and so that I've got 2 copies of these to show up. So we are officially released everywhere in the world now. So congratulations to the authors for this one. About 15 hours ago, it was just Australia, but now everyone can get their hands on this one. So this is an anthology all about the theme of belonging. Before we get started, I'm going to hand over to our authors and Tom to introduce yourselves for the project, starting with Delilah.
Hi, I'm Delilah. You may know me better as the author of Petition, which was an SVFBO 9 semi-finalist, which is about an angry Asian daughter of immigrant fisherfolk fighting her privileged rich kid rivals in a ruthless job hunt tournament. But I'm very excited to be here today as one of the contributing authors to Together as a Distant Star. This has been a long-awaited passion project, unlike any other passion project I have ever done before, and it's been a great honor to be part of it.
Thanks, Delilah. Over to you, Ko.
Okay, I am Ko. I write under C.B. Lansdale, and I am the author of the Upper Decker duology, which is a story featuring non-human characters set on a habitable moon. It's a very character-driven story, relatively low stakes, some horror, and my entry in Together as a Distant Star also takes place in the same world, Nyadria.
Thank you, Ko. Down to Natalie, and then we'll finish with Tom.
I'm Natalie, and I write way too many books. So I've got very, very different books. So one of the ones that are sort of being the most popular at the moment is a cozy historical fantasy about a chronically ill water nymph that's called Reflections of Lily Damselfly. The story in this anthology, though, is from my series, which it's quite long, but you can enter at pretty much any point you want, called the Inner Universe series. And this one, Marauding Ways, is featuring a future main character called Yolanthe, and so that's set in a part of the world that I haven't actually set any full novels in. So if you want to sort of get a completely different to my debut, River and the Galaxy, view of that world, you can read that short story, and it works by itself. So you don't have to read the novel that's going to come at some point.
My name is Tom Mock. I'm an author and an editor. I wrote the urban fantasy The Long Nights, which was a SPIFBO 8 semi-finalist with Before We Go blog. And I have been laboring for about 6 years now to release another full-length novel. But this last weekend, which was my birthday, I finished a rewrite of one of the drafts. So I'm excited about it. I'm going to share it with my editor, and hopefully she'll enjoy it. But I have been very excited to be a part of Together as a Distant Star as an editor and reader and supporter of the project. It's been a lot of fun.
It has been such an awesome project to sort of just be in the back end of and watching it unfold. And we were saying about Delilah earlier, just lighting a fire under everyone over the last sort of 6 months or so, and helping us all get motivated to get it out there in the world. But it's been a long time coming. Hey, AJ, thank you for joining us in the chat. AJ was in this morning's live, which you can go and catch at your leisure now on the channel. But I want to throw out to the authors, what made you excited to get involved in the project, or how did it come to you? And again, we'll just go around the grounds.
So I saw Natalie's tweet back when I was still on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore because, reasons, but it was just something that hit right in that part of me where I was like, this doesn't exist. It should exist. Why doesn't it exist? And the answer is because nobody made it. And so we made it. That's really where this all came about for me. But yeah, I think it was a really open call that was just put out everywhere. And I think the word just kind of spread. And I was one of the lucky ones who saw Natalie's original post.
Yeah, for me, I think I've gotten to know Natalie and many of the other authors much better since this project started. But initially, I was also lucky just to have come across that post, and also E.L. Lyon's Women in Fantasy article that she had done for, I think it was SFF Insiders, I'm not sure. And yeah, I thought it was amazing, just the idea of having women and queer authors who to tackle a subject like belonging, because I think those groups don't really feel represented a lot of the time, or feel that they can enter competitions and things with the same confidence that maybe straight white men might feel. And so it was an opportunity to just put your best foot forward and see if the people who were involved would encourage you along the way. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to submit in the beginning, or if I should write something that's unrelated to my other work. But everyone was able to kind of, we've got quite a mixture. Some people have done short stories that are brand new, and other people have made it fit in with existing stories that they've got. So it's very eclectic, the mix that we've got. And yet when we saw them all together as we were progressing, they all fitted quite nicely. And then, Tom was able to help us structure them in the anthology and see how they could all fit together and almost tell this overarching narrative, even though each story kind of stands on its own.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that the reason I did the tweet originally was that there must have been one or two. I think that it was probably several anthologies and indie author groups that were floating around at the time, and it was very, very white male dominated. Some of them, they would put women on the covers, but then when you looked at the lists, there would be 3% women presented in the anthologies and groups, and it just felt like people like to use us as sort of to bring use our images to bring people in, but then really they didn't want to include us as much. So I think I was just very frustrated that it seemed like women and queer people were just never being included as much as people shouted about doing. And then I've been in a couple anthologies already at that point and have been in one other since. So I just thought that it might be a good way to sort of show that we're here as well, and we do deserve to be represented in anthologies as well. So it's just, I think that's just what I have. I just sort of frustration, did a tweet, and then more came out of it. I think it's probably the last good thing that came out of Twitter, really.
I would agree with that.
I mean, it's about the same time that it started dying, isn't it? So it's one of the last really good things that we got from that place.
Yeah,
so it's quite weird, isn't it, that it serves as an end cap on one social media, but also maybe hopefully a beginning for a lot of queer authors and women authors to sort of be seeing themselves more and finding places they belong within the indie publishing scene.
I mean, just to jump off what Natalie said there, it's a very difficult topic to talk about, the sort of challenges that women and queer authors face in publishing, and anybody who's marginalized along any axis, really, because there's certainly a big push towards reading more diverse and embracing more diverse stories and own voices and the minefields that come with that. But a lot of what doesn't really get talked about is a lot of these projects and like publishing. I mean, most industries are, but publishing in particular it's a very like network heavy kind of industry. A lot of these projects and anthologies and opportunities, a lot of them you hear about through the grapevine, it's through your network. So when you are maybe marginalized along one or more axis, you don't, it's not that there are, I will say, like, for the most part, the indie community is very, very welcoming. Like, I have never tried to join a project and been told, no, we don't want you or anything like that. Like, if people are trying to do something, they're very, very welcoming. But at the same time, it's hard to get access to those opportunities if you're not hearing about them in the first place, because a lot of the time when you hear about them, it's because, oh, you were able to spend a whole lot of money and take time off work and travel to a different country and go to a con and drink with people at, you know, before the plenary sessions or like network at the bar. And that's really great for those of our indie author friends who are local to those areas or who are in a position to be able to do that in their personal circumstances. But I live in Australia. Like, I cannot get myself to Dragon Con on any basis that is justifiable as, like, you know, for my indie author expense. Like, I just nobody knows who I am. I don't sell that many books. So for me to go there, the flights, the hotel, the you know, just the day-to-day cost of being there, the ticket cost, the time off work, childcare, what am, like, you know, and that's for me, who is, you know, I'm in a very privileged position where I went into indie publishing with a whole heap of savings from, you know, my previous life in corporate, right? There are a lot of people, women and queer authors particularly, who aren't as fortunate as I am. They are caregivers, you know, they may have health issues that prevent them from spending a whole lot of time or energy doing all of the 5 million things that you have to do as an indie author if you don't want your book to just kind of die in the void, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Delilah, just in terms of being in the wrong country to get these opportunities is a huge obstacle. Like with me being in South Africa, I also find there's no conventions that I know of that come out this way, except for we have an annual Comic-Con, which is very broad. It covers, you know, films, gaming, everything. So, and I don't think that I've been there a couple of times and I haven't really seen tables dedicated to books, because I'm not too sure that we've got the biggest reading culture. I think there's a lot of interest in like improving education here, but certainly compared to like other countries overseas, I often will end up in like Goodreads top reviewers in South Africa section, and yet I know that I'm not reviewing nearly as many books as some of my friends in other countries. And yeah, even just in accessibility, like Kickstarters are not available in South Africa and in quite a few other countries too. And all of these things just, they help with exposure and you know, being able to send book boxes that are done up, you know, with lots of merchandise inside. All of these can definitely help get your foot in the door for these opportunities. And it is harder for people geographically, and then also, as Delilah said, for women who are often carrying a lot of social responsibilities within their families, and even if they don't have children, just there's often a bit of a wage gap as well in many jobs. Women generally don't find it easy to get paid what they're worth. And I think sometimes we also internalize that a bit as authors. It can be quite difficult to kind of show up in a way where you've got that level of confidence where you're commanding the attention of a room or of a group of people online. There's that hesitance to really say my books are good, they're worth something. especially if you feel like you haven't really had a chance to kind of gauge what the community is like and where you stand in relation to everyone else.
Yeah, I think in connection with that, one thing I've noticed a lot is a lot of the women and queer authors that I know, they'll say that they've tried to reach out to people and tried to grab some of those opportunities. And a lot, I don't know if it's just my experience, but I know a couple others have had the same experience where you just get ghosted a lot, like a lot. So you end up just not doing it, because why bother when nobody's ever going to bother answering you anyway? And then when you speak to some of your white male author friends, they've reached out to the same people and they get immediate responses and they get features really easily, and they're like, oh, just reach out, just do this. And it's like, I've tried, and that is not my experience. So it's quite, in a way, indie publishing is great because it gives us an opportunity we probably wouldn't have had. Like, my stories would never be published traditionally because I can't stick to one genre anyway. And a lot of my characters are very depressed, and it's just, I don't like to write in the American story structure. I stick to my Danish roots. But that also means that it does present some obstacles when you get so used to being refused or to just not hearing back that you end up sort of similar to what Ko said. You just don't have the confidence, because if you're used to getting nothing from what you're trying to put out, you just sort of get disillusioned with it. So I think that's a little bit what this is about as well. We want to show that what we can do together, and if people take a chance on us, we can do great things, but we need those opportunities to actually show up.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to me because I recently had one of my Instagram reels pop off, and it was an Instagram reel about where I recommended epic fantasy novels by women based on their favorite epic fantasy novels by men. And it was just fascinating the kind of comments I was getting there, because I was getting a lot of comments like, oh, I don't consider gender of the author, I just consider the book and the writing on its merits. And it's like, a lot of the time it's like, I know it is said coming from a place of good intentions, let's say, right? And I'm sure it is not one of those things that is necessarily top of mind every day. But a lot of the times when you do scroll through social media, how many books do you see are written by women or written by queer authors that are coming up over and over again in the algorithm? And this is from a lot of people who say they want to read diversely, that they want to support female and queer authors. But a lot of the times when you look at their feed, what are they posting? It's like vast majority of the time, it's like white male authors. And again, this is one of those really difficult things to talk about, because as somebody who notices the pattern, you notice it because you are part of that minority, and you're just seeing the numbers not add up in proportion to the amount of work and the quality of work that people are putting out, right? But it is a difficult conversation to have when you are part of that, because a lot of the time it does come off as you just whining. It really does. But that's the thing about these unconscious biases, because if you don't point them out, then other people don't start also noticing the pattern. And yeah, it's just, it is really interesting to me how many people will say, I don't notice gender. And then my next question usually is, okay, go to your bookshelf. What's the gender split there like? Go to your TBR. What is the gender split there like? Go to your last 20 reads. What is the gender split there like? Yeah. A lot of the time, it is not as equal as they believe it is.
Yeah, and that goes for all the marginalized, especially because I see the exact same argument when you come to talk about Black authors, Asian authors, anything like that, or disabled authors. People are like, oh, I don't notice those things, but then when they look at their shelf, it's very clearly just one specific demographic. and they usually don't include very many marginalized because they don't get the same chances. And if they do, it's usually very narrow genre. So, for example, if you go in to look at romantasy or romance, that's the only place you would find majorly women writers. But then there's also loads of books that get labeled romance and romantasy because they're by a women author, not because the book is actually romance heavy. So there's so much nuance within that as well, I think.
Let's
Would you
also not
say-
talk about women authors writing adult fiction getting labeled as YA either, because we could be here all
Yes.
week.
That's another issue.
I've got a really good comment that's come through from Faye. Say that, you know, self-public gets a lot of attention is the same old, while the beauty of indie and what this project really stands for is that it's the innovation. It's you guys at the forefront, or you women and queer and BIPOC authors at the forefront of this project. And calling out quite rightly that I don't notice those things actually means I've not bothered to notice it, and now I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah, it's tricky because I mean, you get certain prominent reviewers, or you get competitions like SPIFBO that reach, you know, many indie authors all over the world. But I'd say that many of those prominent reviewers and people who are judging in SPIFBO would probably come largely from the US, maybe a few from the UK as well. And I mean, I can't help thinking that that cultural perspective might color the way they look at you know, books written by people in other parts of the world from other cultures. And like, as Natalie also mentioned, like when you're dealing with mental health issues in books or characters that are neurodiverse, sometimes following characters who are a little bit more passive is quite shocking, or it feels wrong to people who've been conditioned to read about characters that have a lot of agency. I know the Americans love their characters with agency, and they're strong female characters who are leading the charge and, you know, doing what the guys are doing. But yeah, there are many different kinds of characters and many lenses through which you can look at story and what makes a good story, and you know, what, because I think sometimes we're using entirely different like measuring sticks for even being able to judge stories. Because the story,
It's very tricky. So Natalie mentioned earlier about how she likes to stick to, you know, her Danish roots for storytelling. I made a very conscious choice when I published that I was going to write in American English instead of Australian English, which you would have thought I would write as somebody who is Chinese Australian. But I did that because I have heard way too many horror stories about readers reporting books written in not American English as being full of typos. And that was just something that I, starting out, was just like, I don't want to risk it. I'm going to try and market very hard and reach readers from all over the world. I'm not marketing to Americans exclusively, but if you look at my stats, like I would guess 70% of my sales are probably to the US, which is a real shame because in Australia here, we had a really strong tradition of Australian sci-fi and fantasy. We've had many great Australian sci-fi fantasy authors who, you know, were all publishing and very active, you know, around like the 80s and 90s. But like just recently, there's been, I would say, at least from what I've observed, it feels like a lot of the stories that publishing, the industry at large, are, you know, sort of pushing tend to be from the UK or from the US. And this extends into, you know, diaspora stories as well. Like a lot of what you'll find in Asian fantasy, which I hate as a term because it's just like, I'm sorry, like Asian fantasy is not a subgenre. It just isn't. But a lot of, you know, the diaspora stories like coming out from Asian diaspora authors are, you know, many of them American. And the diaspora experience is, you know, it's not uniform across the world. It is different in different parts of the world, and depending on which wave of the diaspora you were part of. So yeah, it's just one of the things I really, really appreciated about this particular anthology is that there was never any push to, tone down your voice or your story to fit any particular audience. And that's really unusual for anthologies. So most anthologies get put together by one editor or maybe two co-editors. And they're sort of the person or people who have the vision for the anthology as a whole, and they choose who to put in and who to invite and pretty much take it start to finish like this is their baby. And that was not how this project came to be. Like, Natalie provided the initial spark. A lot of that initial organization effort came from Natalie pulling people into group DMs. It came from Natalie putting together polls. Co was doing like a whole heap of polls and spreadsheets and documents as well. And once, things sort of got into motion, there was never any sort of like, okay, if you don't hand in the story by X date, then you're out. Like there was no rush to publication. There was no trying to pressure anybody into putting in a story that they didn't feel confident with, that they weren't proud of. It was always very, like, every single decision we made along the way, every major decision, like, we arrived at by consensus. And anytime anybody had, concerns or feedback, like, we talked about it as a group. And that is just so rare. It is so rare.
That is something we were touching on in the first chat this morning as well, is just how it was such a respectful process of just meeting people wherever they were without putting the pressure on to get things done. And it took probably 2 years, maybe 2.5. So it's been in the works for quite a while. And then sort of the first few months of this year was when it all sort of came together. The collaboration almost was part of the theme. Like, we were able to belong as a group. And I'm saying that as someone who's purely been in the back end, just doing social media, and I don't really put words in your mouth, Tom, but probably felt that as well, also being in the back end and being part of that project. So how did you as authors find this as a collaboration experience, thinking about that theme of belonging and how important it was to the whole project?
I think I probably pushed quite a lot for it to be really collaborative, because I wanted it to be something where everyone felt they could participate in some way or fashion. And that's why I was very sort of, let's not set any hard deadlines. Let's make sure that everyone is able to participate as much as they can. That was another thing I noticed with this one, particularly because I've been in a couple other anthologies. What you notice is that women and queer authors also usually have quite a lot of, we were talking about the emotional labor before, and we have quite a lot of other things to do where it's quite evident that a lot of the men with wives and kids, they have less, like, their wives take on an extra load, where we felt that with this one, because everyone was like, I don't have time for this and I'm exhausted. And it was very different from some of the other anthologies I've been in, where it's very clear it's always the men leading the way because they have the extra time usually. Not always, there are outliers, of course, but it is very evident that it is usually the women and queer people that sit with like all the extra stuff and at home as well, and caring responsibilities. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that everyone could be included and to sort of really do it as a community project, really.
Like, I'll be honest, when Natalie said that this was how this was going to run, like, my ex-corporate auditor brain just like instant panic, because I was just like, what do you mean there's no structure? What do you mean there are no deadlines? How can I make sure that I hit my deadlines if there are no deadlines to hit? Like, I was just freaking out the whole time. And I tried to like keep that like, you know, under control, but like eventually it did get to a point where I was like, no guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to, you know, send you a list, a 3-page list of questions in the group DMs, but like I need to know what is going on. And thankfully, like, the group was very nice, and nobody ever said, Delilah, you have too many questions. Just shut up. Like,
We
there's me on
needed you.
like, like everybody was
it's
so
good
nice
because
about
we
it.
need at a certain point you do need to start actually hitting deadlines, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
I think so many of us are like somewhat neurodivergent, and you know, the ADHD, the attention goes out the window sometimes, and being able to like nail down deadlines and things, you need a person who's got that drive to then bring everyone together. And so I think it was a void in the group, and we needed you to fill that void, and everything just came together so beautifully once we did start nailing down some of the specifics. I mean, I did appreciate though that we were able to like vote on so many things, even when we were coming up with the cover together. I mean, I've done covers for individual clients, but never for a group. And so that was quite intimidating, because at least when you're trying to please one person, you can start getting quite specific, finding out what they like. But to try and please about 12 or more people involved, it was a bit daunting. But I found once we started nailing down like through votes of like with like samples of covers that people liked and what had worked in other anthologies, we were able to kind of settle on like certain color schemes and like a theme. And then from there, I could also like start looking at the stories. And while we couldn't have elements from every person's story, there were some that had like, they were a bit vague and they could possibly fit a few different stories, like the skull that was at the corner at the bottom half of the book. Yeah, things like that just worked. And it was lovely to see, to get the reception from everyone, that sense of everyone was proud to be able to say, you know, this is my book, I'm in this anthology. And I think everyone felt quite represented by the designs that we settled on, which was lovely for me as an illustrator and typesetter.
I mean, I don't think Ko has really fully stated the significance of what she did to get us to this point. She did 4 concepts for the cover. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Most cover artists and designers that I have worked with do a maximum of 3 max. Usually it's 2, and you know, as we are, many of us are indie authors and very cash strapped and working off low budget, sometimes you only get the 1, and that's the one you just have to work with. Ko did 4, and this is all in her own time. And she also did all of the interior artwork. Like the amount of work that everybody has put into this project has been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm not talking about sheer quantum here, right? Because again, going back to the core concept of this collaboration as making sure that everyone who wanted to could contribute and could contribute to the maximum level that they felt comfortable giving. Like, so many people, they are already so busy in their real lives with all of their other obligations, and they gave what they could to this project. We had people who were not in a position to donate time, and they donated, you know, funds. So Erica funded both of those beautiful proof copies that Chris has over there. Karen provided free ISBNs for the group. So many little things along this very complicated journey of actually getting to publication. There's like, I actually made a gigantic Gantt sheet, spreadsheet, tracker task thing. It is massive, and every single line item on that was assigned to somebody, and every single time we needed something that needed doing, somebody put their hand up and volunteered for it. And that's just like, that is, I've done a lot of projects in my time, both as an author and in my previous corporate life. It is so hard to get anybody to volunteer to do anything. But this group really stepped up, and at no point was there any sort of, I don't know, it was just like so refreshing to be part of something where everybody was just like so behind it. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think that really speaks, though, to just the quality of camaraderie around the project. Like there wasn't any kind of hierarchy in it from its conception.
Mm.
No one was really in charge. And so because of that, everyone felt invested in what we were doing. Everyone felt equally a part of the decisions that were being made. And I'm saying this as someone who is just helping as an editor. I really enjoyed just being a part of making something with everybody. And Chris, you said something in the last session that we did about how you don't really feel like you did a whole lot. And I think potentially a lot of us feel like we weren't really doing that much because it seemed like Delilah was always sending out checklists of things that we need to do. And we knew that Co was working so hard on the covers. And so because we all felt invested in being part of making this, I know I felt like I was more than happy to give more of my time than I was. In part also because I knew I would never be asked to do more than I could. People were very sensitive. Everyone was very sensitive about not demanding anything of anyone. And even to the point, if that meant that, for instance, we didn't end up doing, excuse me, we didn't end up doing a Kickstarter because it would take a lot of time and a lot of effort and potentially money, and people didn't have a lot of experience doing it. It wasn't something that anyone in the group decided that we were just going to push through and do, regardless of what the authors or anyone helping felt like they were capable of. And so there was a spirit of the entire project that just felt very collaborative and positive. And I think that just breeds this spirit of togetherness where everybody wanted to do their part so that we could bring this book to life and people could read it and enjoy the effort that everyone put into it, really just as a celebration of all of our love of fiction. And this wasn't about any one person's ego or any one person's reputation. There wasn't any divide in the group between people who had published a lot, and so they should be listened to, and someone who was maybe contributing a piece of fiction for the first time. It was just a supportive community of artists who love art and love fiction and wanted to put something out together. And I mean, for me personally, Natalie's kind of joking when she says that this was like the last good thing to come out of Twitter. But when you say that, Natalie, actually, I realized that this is the last thing that Twitter really gave me. This was the last time someone said, hey, we should do something together. And I dove in as quickly as I could because it's fun to do these kinds of things with people, especially everyone that's as nice as everyone in this group. And hopefully we can do this again.
It was really cool because you were, Tom, also you were saying in the first one that we had people who didn't end up submitting to the final product. We had a lot of other people that initially were very keen to come in some way, shape or form, from Natalie's post, from E.L. Lyon's post, to the point where the title is actually from Steve Hugh Westenra, who was initially going to publish something in here but ended up not being able to, but we still got a really cool title from that person. There's a list of people in the back end who were just really excited at this concept, that this coming together as just a respectful group to bring out this wonderful project. And we have, I think we hit 6 different continents. We've got authors from all over the globe, and there was a funny meme that was going out where Australia was complaining about not getting sales, and then Co came in with South Africa, and then we had Latin America come in and say, wait. And it was just really funny to bring that sense of belonging together as well. Just to say, you know what, we are all in this together. So we had quite a deep question in the first run this morning, and I'm going to ask all of you as well, because it does spark some conversation, is how does the theme of belonging resonate with each of you individually? It's a deep question. No one jump out at once.
I can start. I can't remember who suggested the theme. It could have been me because belonging is a recurring theme in a lot of my books. I don't really talk about it a lot because people think it's bragging or something, but I've traveled and lived in quite a lot of places by myself. Basically, I left Denmark 13 years ago, something like that. And because I didn't feel like I didn't feel right where I was, and I traveled around a lot and worked all over to try and find my spot and my people. I'm in the UK now, and in some ways it does feel like I belong here. I'm really, really fortunate with the job I have, where we feel a little bit like my department specifically, we feel a little bit like a big family. We all sort of take care of each other. So I think in a way I've found a place where I belong, but I'm also still sort of searching. So it's always been something I come back to in my writing, because I think being neurodivergent, and I'm ACE as well, so it's really difficult sometimes to figure out where exactly you fit, because I'm Scandinavian, but I'm also a little bit British, I'm a little bit Australian, a little bit Canadian. So I feel like there's pieces where I belong in different places. So I think that's why it means quite a lot to me to sort of figure out where you feel right in yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that I think quite a few of us, not all of us have lived in many different places, but many of us have that sense of, having one foot in one country and another in a different place. Like Delilah's Chinese Australian, and I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, but I'm of British descent, although I don't have any like close, UK relatives that I could get citizenship and hop on a plane to go to the UK. I'd need to go through like all kinds of visas and things. And yet you feel like you're from different places, and yet the exact combination that you are isn't always something that you find in the people around you, but you do engage in other people in a way that people from other multicultural backgrounds understand, because they've experienced some of that too. And I think at this stage of my life, I'm also kind of at peace with that sense of you never find complete commonalities with any one person, but you can find a little bit of something with everybody you meet. And I mean, the topic of belonging is just interesting because I think all of us would like to feel that we can put forth a version of ourselves that is authentic. And there's a risk in that, because when that version is rejected, it's much more painful than if you've been putting on a mask, so to speak. And that's a topic that comes up in a lot of my books, actually, in quite literal ways. Hiding parts of yourself from the people closest to you. And so I was very grateful to be around people where I didn't feel like I needed to, try and hide anything. I could write a story that was something that I wanted to put out there. It didn't have to fit a particular brief, or it didn't need to be especially marketable. And I think obviously, you do want to have sales, but not at the expense of, putting forth things that you really care about, stories that you really want to tell, because otherwise you just start getting these kind of globalized, subgenres where every book starts looking much the same as the next. And I think those sorts of stories are, they're in danger of being taken over by things like AI, because AI can kind of mass produce what is very common, and what is general. But when you get specific things, that's harder to replicate.
Yeah, and one thing I really appreciated about the particular theme for this anthology was that when I read the first notes that came out, and it was like, oh, the theme is belonging, I kind of had a panic, in the sense that because I am Chinese Australian, because my my main series is all about that epic fantasy, but told from the lens of the immigrant perspective. Like there is a sort of this expectation that if you are of a BIPOC background, there's kind of this expectation that whatever you write is going to sort of center your BIPOC-ness, for want of a better word. It's like even just listening to me talk, right? Like my there's an Australian comedian here where she's like, my accent does not match my face, right? Like and there's this sort of disjunction where the way I sound does not match the way people might necessarily expect me to sound based on how I look and based on what they know of my background. And even to this day, like I will be talking to somebody, I will make it'll be very clear from our conversation that I went to school here, I graduated here, I live here, all that stuff. And I will inevitably get the question, but where are you really from? And like, these days, like it's a little better. Like I think people are a bit more sensitive to how that can kind of come across. And so usually it's phrased as like, oh, like, what's your family background and things like that.
Yeah.
And like, I personally, I don't mind. I'm proud of being Chinese. I'm proud that I am from Hong Kong. And I'm proud of my heritage, but there is still that sense of like, oh, well, you're not quite Australian. Like, hence, like, there's always that qualifier of, Chinese Australian. And some days I feel good about it because it's like, yes, I am Chinese. I feel proud of that. I happily tell everybody I'm Chinese, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, you could, if there's no special reason to call it out, you could just say I'm Australian. Like I am Australian. And like when I go traveling, again, like unless you hear me speak English, like you might just assume I'm Chinese. But put me in China, like I can't actually read anything on a restaurant menu, right? Like the way I order at Chinese restaurants is I will order in Cantonese, but I will be ordering based off of what I know the dishes are called. And sometimes like I get in trouble because like they don't have it at like that particular restaurant, or like they've sold out of it. And then they see me, they see I look Chinese, and they'll hand me the Chinese menu. And then I have to do the really embarrassing thing of where like I put the menu under the table and get like my phone out and pull up the Google Translate app to like try and get like the English, because I don't know what it says, right? And so a lot of the other thing about, when you grow up Asian and you become an author and you write books is you write about generational trauma, because like the way it kind of works in Chinese culture, at least, is like the parent-child relationship is the dynamics they're just something else. And so when I kind of thought about this theme of belonging, I kind of turned it around on its head. It was less about a character trying to find somewhere where they belonged, and more a character trying to more a character laying claim to something and figuring out if and testing whether that claim is as good a claim as that character thinks it is. And sometimes it's not.
We had quite an array of stories in tone throughout this entire anthology. We were talking about AJ's story this morning being this lovely sort of opening of belonging, very warm feeling, going to Valentina's story, which is just very, very dark. Natalie with cannibals, we're talking about the cannibals earlier this morning on page 2. And then we end with Delilah's story. So Tom, how did you find a way to make that all flow from beginning to end?
Great question. I wanted to say something about the authorship of the stories. Especially when I was reading through all of them, I was largely just reading the stories, and so I was unaware of who had written what based on their identity. And I don't think by any means are any of the authors suggesting that you should read this because, you know, they're women or BIPOC or from marginalized groups, and that in and of itself is reason enough to read the books because that gives them value. What I found personally in my experience reading through the stories was that each story was surprisingly unique. And as a fan of sci-fi fantasy, one of the reasons I'm drawn to the genre is because each new book, hopefully that I pick up, feels a little different, feels like I'm stepping into a new world. And I found not only the settings of all of the stories were incredibly diverse, but the nature and character of the stories and the nature and character of the protagonists and their struggles. And that was just really interesting, but also did present some unique challenges in terms of trying to decide what order the story should go in. Since this anthology was structured around a theme, instead of something like setting or even subgenre, it was a little bit more difficult to decide which stories should be grouped with which stories and if they should be grouped based on tone or some motifs. And ultimately, I decided that it would probably be best to try to structure the anthology on tone, to try to give the readers a little bit of a journey from story to story in terms of not only the endings or whether or not the story itself had a darker quality to it, but to try to structure it in such a way that where one story ended and the next began would feel like a sensible tonal shift, or that there would be enough similarity between them. There's a lot of stories that are about families. There are a lot of stories that are about love in one way or the other, not necessarily love stories like romantic stories, but stories about what happens when love isn't present in characters' lives, when families reject them, when they don't feel like they belong in their society. Ko's story is about a very strict social structure, and about very severe justice. Many of the stories are also about a kind of personal awakening by the protagonists to a sense that they don't belong where they are and that maybe they should choose to go somewhere else. And I tried as best I could to structure the stories in a way that respected those journeys of the characters. And really the truth is, I think we could have put the stories in some kind of random order generator and it would have been just as good. And I say that because the stories weren't ordered by quality and they weren't ordered by name recognition. And so once I had read all of the stories, I did not feel a great deal of pressure to get it right. I just tried to find some kind of order because, as we talked about in the first launch session, the stories are all really good. They're all very unique. They come from unique perspectives, and they all end really, really well, which as an editor, I find to be particularly unique. Ending stories well is a challenge because in order for the story to end well, it has to really be about something in order for it to land somewhere that feels satisfying for the reader. And I was really impressed with all of the authors, both the authors who decided they did want to feature their stories in the anthology and the authors who felt like they needed more time than they could give to their stories. I was really impressed with how everyone's story really did feel like it landed somewhere that was satisfying in some way and left me wanting to read more, which hopefully will pull readers from one story into the next. And I think maybe that's a testament to the fact that these stories were structured the way they were around a theme. You know, and we're using the word theme, which can sometimes feel a little academic maybe to some readers. I might almost say that the spirit of all the stories, the heart of the stories that the stories grew out of, was this need for belonging. wherever the characters may have found it. And I think that, more than anything, probably created a kind of intentional aspect to all of the stories that make them feel like they fit together as well as they do. So just round of applause to all the authors. They did a great job.
It has been such a cool project to be in the background of. With what Tom was saying before, again, going to hand over to the authors to talk a little bit about your individual stories within this anthology. We'll start with Delilah, go through Co, and then Natalie.
I think, could you bring up the question that came up a little bit earlier in the chat? Because I did have a thought that was related to my story when that came up. So the question was, I do wonder how you go about reconciling the divide between your authenticity and how marketable or how well a book will sell as an indie author. Yeah, so this one like really gets to the heart of like why I went the indie route, because I don't write what the general public would perceive of as fantasy. I don't write about dragons. I don't have mythical creatures in my books as like real creatures that you encounter. What I do have is a secondary world, East Asian inspired setting where everybody can do magic. That is the fundamental speculative premise of what I write. And it started because I was reading about the blockchain for work, and I had a thought which was like, what if you could have like the objective truth as like a fundamental law of reality? What would that look like, and what could you do with it? If that was how reality worked. So if somebody lied to me, and I could actually prove like definitively that that was a lie and not some sort of subjective experience, how would that change what society would look like? How would that change how people live and relate to each other? How would that drive what just existing would look like? So that was where the magic for my setting came from. Razir's glory itself is very unusual, I think, in epic fantasy, because with most epic fantasy stories, the mother, she's dead. She was dead before the story started. Like that she needed to die so that the protagonist could do their chosen one thing and have chosen one trauma and go off and save the world. But like the mother, like she was never important. Like in a lot of the epic fantasy that I've read, she barely rates a mention. Sometimes she's not named. And that just really pisses me off. Because it's just like we live in a time where the fight for women's autonomy and control of their bodies and their reproductive rights is, at threat. We had a period of time where in some parts of the world, thankfully where I am, as a woman, like I feel like I have bodily control. I feel like I have the right to decide whether or not I am gonna be a mother. There's, obviously societal pressure and things like that. But at the end of the day, if I really wanted to not get married and remain childless, like I could do that and live a relatively comfortable life for doing that. But in so many places of the world, it's not like that. And it just frustrates me so much that in a genre where it's called speculative, we're not seeing these experiences represented, and we very rarely see mothers even as characters. They're not even cardboard cutouts for crying out loud, because they're dead. And so I got really frustrated about that, and I decided that I would write something, but it was going to be from the point of view of the mother of the chosen one. And what really makes it kind of like not marketable is I will say up front, like there are, as has been mentioned, there's been like some dark themes in this anthology. And for my particular story, I really highly recommend looking at the content warnings, particularly if you are sensitive to medical procedures, gore, that type of thing, because it's just something that happens to so many women in their lives, and we don't talk about it. It's not portrayed. It's not like, for epic fantasy, a genre where like you have so many stories that turn on people getting married to people from other countries to forge these alliances between kingdoms and have heirs and successions, and like, you know, who's got the right to ascend to the throne, all that stuff. Why do we not have any stories that center the mother and what she has to go through to make all of this happen? So yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, I really love that about Delilah's story. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has covered that terrain, but it feels like that's something that we need. Like, you could write a whole lot of stories on the mother's experience in those situations. And yeah, I hope to see more of that. Yeah, for me.
Sorry, I was just going to agree that yes, I think it's one of those things that it's just not, because I've tried to query a story like that, and nobody wants to read about a Viking mother, apparently.
That's a shame. People are missing out.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, what a pitch. I'm in.
But it's women's issues, right? So it's not acknowledged, it's not talked about, and it's definitely not depicted and not marketable. Or, sorry, it is marketable, but only as, like, I don't know, women's fiction, which I have a whole separate rant on that we don't have time for.
Yeah. Sorry, it was your turn, Ho.
Like, even women's health, like their reproductive health, that's another whole issue, you know, of how women can get proper care for things like endometriosis and to have their health concerns taken seriously. Yeah, I know it's different depending on what country you're in, but I know many seem to struggle with just having people be attentive to them, even if they've got really serious problems. But yeah, for me, in my whole world, I suppose I've just gotten tired of gender being an issue that people even, you know, bring up as something that should be pivotal to the narrative. So that's why I actually wanted to write about a non-human species where they don't reproduce the way we would. They've got somewhat mystical origins. Their young emerge from the sea. It's a bit like having the stork deliver your babies to you. And then the whole clan would come and look after the young. So, I mean, just being able to take gender off the table as a topic that would be a cause of division or you know, someone being placed above someone else, that was very freeing. So it's still a society that comes with social hierarchies and classes, but then I can just focus on, you know, the class differences as the main source of the conflict, and I don't need to bring gender into it. So although you do have characters that will use the pronouns he, him, or she, her, biologically, I'd say like the sexual dimorphism between those who go by male or female, it's like hardly noticeable. And yeah, that made it opened up possibilities. So you can have, you know, soldiers, warriors who are female. No one's going to be able to go and say, oh, you know, they wouldn't have the sort of musculature or the frame to be doing that. I've got male characters who are kind of more, you know, like Oculus is somewhat effeminate, you could say. He's more an intellectual. He enjoys dancing and dressing up nicely. And yeah, that was wonderful, being able to just create this world where that, you know, no one can come after me on these topics. It is in the nature of the world Niadria I've created. It's biologically, these characters can be just about anything. But yeah, the class differences, they grew out of just this idea that, okay, if you do have these clans that go and harvest their young, you know, some of these clans would have established earlier on, and they would have, maybe some would have become more technologically advanced than others. And then when they discover each other, as what happens, you know, with colonization, those that have more resources and that do have the means to kind of suppress others when they encounter those with less, then okay, how do we incorporate them into the kind of empire we're busy growing? Where do these tensions come across? And I guess that's part of my life experience. Growing up, I'm descended from colonials who came to South Africa. It's something that I was taught about when I was in school, because I grew up in post-apartheid South Africa. So, the education I got was very much about like confronting these things from the past, and I'm very grateful for it because I feel like in this country we kind of wear it on our sleeve. Everyone knows about apartheid in South Africa. And I was able to tackle these issues, as a child already, and being like the first generation of school kids to have kids of different colors, to you, Black and Indian, all sorts, in the same school as you, where the kids in grades above you were still predominantly white, and you just see like this integration happening before you. It's left a mark on me, and it needed to come out in the stories without taking ownership of another person's story or trying to make it about my personal context. I needed to have a completely different world, completely different system, but still be able to explore these issues of like how we treat people differently based on where they come from. And often it is so much more than just what a person looks like. It's also what socioeconomic bracket they're from. So that set the tone for the divides that you see in the stories that I write between the different characters. And Gil Duno, who's the main character in Flight of the Guildmaster, my short story in this anthology, she is from quite a well-off background, one of the Praemor clans, and then she, because she was from a well-off background, and she also happens to possess this gift that makes her very valuable to other clans that are very powerful. She's taken into the Transmutation Guild and taught resin craft, and she becomes. It all happens when she's still very young, before she has a chance to really understand how her gift is going to be used. And I think once she does come to the point where she has some understanding of that, she actually ends up, going forward, even though she can see some of the dangers of it, because it will protect a friend of hers from having to be the one to kind of almost give up her soul in doing quite dark deeds. And so she becomes part of this kind of twisted justice system where she has to mark criminals in a sense and change public perception of them. And it just seemed a very interesting theme to explore of like, okay, there are narratives that we come across every day, just going onto social media, and you sometimes just question like, okay, who's writing these narratives? Are the people being presented as good, truly good? Are those who are kind of being mocked and derided, have they done anything to deserve that? Where is all this coming from? So just getting this character to kind of confront the choices she's made, to ask herself whether she can do things differently, whether there is belonging in a healthier place outside of this system. That was a fun and a challenging topic for me to cover.
I forgot the question. I'm a bit tired today, so I've got a bit of brain fog.
It's okay. It was just about your story.
Oh,
your
about
particular
my
story in this anthology.
So I don't know where it came. So I've known this character for quite a while. So Yolanthe is later in life. She's a pirate and she's quite scrupulous. Like she just sort of does whatever she feels like. She has very twisted morals, which I think I wanted to explore where that all came from and why she's very sort of, she thinks about herself first. And I wanted to, I really like the idea of trauma and mental health, and how that shapes the way that you see the world and the way you react to things, and how your opinions form, I suppose. So mental health is like the carrying theme or the recurring theme in that in a universe series that I've got. So I'm not sure exactly how I came up with the story, but I think I always knew some of her backstory. But she's a bit of a liar, so I actually discovered quite a few things writing the short story, because she tells the story later on, like what happened and everything, but she has changed things quite a lot. So I hope if anyone reads her novel later, it's not inconsistencies because I'm stupid, it's because she lies. She's very unreliable. Don't trust anything she says. But this story, because she's quite young, she's a lot more honest here, so you get the real picture of what actually happened. So this one is set in one of the sand galaxies, that basically the place that in the galaxy that nobody thinks about because hardly anyone lives there anymore. Her family is sort of slightly ostracized. So they're from the Stone Desert, which it used to be a better place, but it just sort of it's a very harsh environment to live in anyway. And earring disappeared. And they're just sort of they've been really unfortunate with droughts and heat and desert conditions turning quite grim. Her family is that because it's traditional that they live where they live, so they're very sort of set in their ways. And I think, I don't know why, but like starvation and hunger comes up in quite a lot of my stories. I mean, I've grown up in Denmark, so I've never experienced anything in that realm myself. But for some reason, that is like one of the things I always come back to. I'm really scared of starving and of sort of not having enough food. And I think that's just why that's what's come out, where her family, they're starving, they're walking out of the desert, and they end up in the capital. But it's sort of everyone that could leave have already left at this point. Because it is a big planet they're on, but you only see a tiny bit of it. And I've not actually set any other stories in that area. But I think it was just sort of, Yolanthe has a very particular idea of what would happen if she escapes, and we don't really get to see all the in between years, but it doesn't really turn out the way she hoped. But she's very hopeful at the end of the story. But yeah, it's one of those where she has a family that they do actually care quite a lot, but they don't understand that she has different views and ideas and wants in life. Like they're like, how could you want anything else? Like the rain will come back and then everything will be fine. But she's just not about that. She chooses herself and her own happiness over her family in the end. How that happens and why, you'll have to read.
It was a good sales pitch right at the end there. I'm already sold on this novel. I'm ready to learn more about what happens.
Probably, actually, when we're talking about authenticity and marketability, it's probably going to be one of my more marketable books, even though Yolanthe is also quite unlikable because she has terrible views. Like she thinks slavery is fine, which is just ridiculous. But it does have an enemies to lovers. Like she's a pirate captain and she gets captured by a pirate hunter, and then she captures him and things go haywire. But yeah,
I was already sold before, and look, I'm basic. The enemies to lovers thing gets
Well, usually it's just like rivals, but I mean, Pirate Hunter and Pirate Captain is like proper enemies. Yeah.
I think you've all shared some amazing insights into not only your stories, but also your backgrounds and why this theme, or as Tom was saying earlier, that the spirit of this anthology is so important. And it's been such a pleasure to be in the back end of watching all of these different people just come together as humans and meet everyone where you're all at. This is such a special project, and I do hope that people pick it up and give it a go. There's a lot of different voices in here. My TBR has grown exponentially after just reading snippets from a lot of the authors in here. And I hope that it does the same for everyone to go and look at all these wonderful authors that we have. We were saying earlier, we've got people who have been in the game for a little while. We've got first-time authors in here, which it makes it such a unique and special project. But before we do sign off for this evening, I do want to do a quick around the grounds with everyone and just let people know where they can find you. We'll start with Delilah and work our way around to Tom.
All right, so you can find me everywhere on my website, delilahwan.com. You can get my books through your local library. You can request them at your preferred local bookstore. You can buy them direct from me online. And if you would like yours hand signed, that is probably the best way to go about it. And if you, this might get me pushback from my fellow panelists here, but I am a heathen who reads books and series out of order. So if you're not really into like kind of like the magic school like fantasy job interview vibe, you can just cut to the second book and just go on an epic fantasy heist with like a quest across the high seas for forbidden power. And yeah, you don't have to start with the first book if you don't feel like it.
Yeah, I didn't come prepared with my geology, but I do have my, this is my novelette on hand, The Tidings of Drastave. That's a bit about Emmis, who's the mentor to Oculus, who's one of my main characters in the Upper Decker geology. Yeah, speaking of that, the second book in my geology comes out on the 25th of June, so not very far away now. And it'll be lovely to have that complete so that people can confidently start on Far Removed, knowing that they're not going to be kept waiting to get to the second book. Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is cblansdale.com, or I'm under at cblansdale. That's my handle for pretty much everything, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. I am still on Twitter, but yeah, I'm trying to move over to the more fun places where people are a little bit less problematic, or where there's a bit less drama, let's put it that way. Yeah, so I hope to hear from everyone soon, not just on this panel, but I also want to follow up with all of the other panelists and try and catch up with some books that are on my growing TBR too.
Yeah, you can find me at Natalie Kelder everywhere except TikTok, because I'm not good with videos. My website is also just nataliekelder.co.uk. I also have signed copies, and if you're okay to pay the postage, I also do sprayed edge copies of my books. You get merch with all orders. I've got a lot of books. If you like cannibals, like in my short story in this anthology, you can start with my debut, which is River in the Galaxy, which also weirdly has cannibals, but very different ones. These ones speak Swedish. That is an in-joke for the Swedish, Danish, Scandinavian people, because we always like to tease each other. If you are more into sort of cozy, lovely sort of vibes where nobody gets eaten, you can check out Reflection of Lily Damselfly, which is a cozy historical fantasy. I think my next book is not out till October, but that will be a gothic historical fantasy. So yeah, stay tuned for that one.
I can be found most places at Tom Mock, usually Tom_Mock. And you can find me at my website, tommock.com, where you can find out a little bit about my books and about the editing services I supply. Man.
Cool. I will have everyone linked in the description box down below. So if you want to check out any of those websites, please go ahead and do so. They are down there for you. This has been awesome. So a huge thank you to Tom for coming here a second time today. Went to bed and came back early in the morning. I appreciate you as co-host. And of course, to all of the wonderful authors that have joined us for this evening. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll say goodbye to the people who are watching. Thank you for joining us as well. Ciao.